Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the next episode of the Mint Mob podcast. Jason here, joined by my buddy Alex across the pond in Germany. We're going to dive into a few topics today. Maybe cruise the internet, see what's happening in the world of crypto. We've got charts moving up in the coin world, charts moving down in the NFT world. We're going to help you make sense of it all today and talk over a few of these topics, as well as perhaps maybe mention an Ethereum ETF and what's going on with that. So, Alex, how are you, my friend? What's going on?
Hey man, I'm great. I'm happy to be here again, of course. Watching the markets closely. So, seeing a lot of green finally. I mean, we have had a lot of weeks without a lot of movement. I'm not sure if we are past the sideways movement. I feel like it's still within the range, but yeah, feels like we are on a good way to cross the 70K and get back to where we want to be, right? Solana is doing great as well, 180. And yeah, I hope you guys already got your Solana before the pump now, so you're able to get your 21 piece as cheap as possible. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the markets right now. You already mentioned it. There is a Ethereum ETF on its way or not. We don't know, but there is definitely a decision near. So what do we know about that?
I think the deal with the Ethereum ETF is, again, I think we mentioned this before, it just comes down to staking earnings. I think that because it is normally ETFs are sort of tied to underlying, I don't want to say fixed assets, but more like commodities, things that don't necessarily throw off cash flow. But if you've got, an underlying asset that's throwing off cash flow, like Ethereum that's staked, I think it changes the game legally to a degree. I was just reading an article. I didn't get all the way through it, but basically that seems to be the sort of challenge with that. I'm sure there'll be some sort of workaround. I think they already offered to classify the Ethereum staked earnings as some sort of different thing, or either remove the clause altogether so that it's not even part of what's happening with it. But I think that's really the crux of it. So I think the decision is going to come down to how they handle the staked earnings from Ethereum. So we'll see what happens with that for sure. But yeah, I mean, what are you seeing over in Europe right now?
Um, you mean regarding like the ETFs?
Yeah, has there been any news on your end?
Not really. It's unfortunately nobody even cares. But I mean, we have seen what country did recently approve the Bitcoin and the Ethereum ETF? Was it Hong Kong, right?
I think it was Hong Kong. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was. And Canada got one, if I'm not wrong.
I want to say Canada
And
was first, weren't they? Didn't they have it first before anybody? Sorry to interrupt you.
do they also have Ethereum or just Bitcoin?
I want to say they had a Ethereum, but you know what? Let me look it up. Let's see, Canadian
Yeah, sure.
ETF for Ethereum. It all runs together after a while. There's so much
Yeah,
information.
definitely.
All right, let's
I
see
mean,
that.
it's interesting that every country has its own regulations, and yeah, the world looks at the United States, and I hope that our good friend Gary is opening the doors for the ETF.
Good old Gary, Mr. Weasel himself. Yeah, that's Gensler for those of you guys who aren't following the markets. But yeah, to answer your question, Canada does have an Ethereum ETF. It's called the CI Galaxy Ethereum ETF, and it trades under the ticker symbol ETHX-B-T. So yeah, they've got a couple. It looks like they also have a Bitcoin ETF, and these are tracking the price of those underlying assets. So yeah, the precedent has been set, my friend, and I believe for whatever reason, even though Canada was confiscating accounts during the whole trucker occupation of Ottawa, the whole trucker rebellion that they had going on, for some reason they still were first, I think, to market with these ETFs. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you Americans have to follow Canada. Um, but talking about the United States and their position in the whole world economy, um, there is actually something going on which people on X call the de-dollarization. And you may have heard about the BRICS countries, like that union in the east. I'm not even sure about all the countries inside, but it's definitely Russia, China, I think Iran, um, and it feels like they are kind of trying to bring the dollar down by just stop using it. I
Hmm.
just read the news that China actually sold a bunch of a pretty big bunch of their dollars of the dollar treasury, buying gold instead. And yeah, we've been talking a lot about the world economy and the U.S. economy, and have already mentioned and realized that especially all the Western economies are going down. But where do you see it going? Like especially compared to these BRICS countries?
Yeah, so the BRICS countries are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and what's the S? I forget. South Africa. Yeah, and so there has been a push for de-dollarization going on actually for the last 2 decades. It's just been accelerating lately, I think. And actually, the very first time I ever earned any significant amount of money, this was happening, and this was back in like um, 2000 and I think 2006. It was just before the big crash in the mid 2000s, and I was basically working with a local financial firm, like a little boutique family financial firm, looking for investments. Because even back then, I knew that if I sat on my cash, it would depreciate. So the problem with having money is that if you don't do something with it, you lose your purchasing power. So you have to put it to work, right? So when you earn money, the job isn't done. Now you get another job, which is now you have to find a place to put it to work. And so, I was looking to buy rental property or looking to buy into commercial properties, something that would be inflation resistant, because this idea of the BRICS countries sort of de-dollarizing away from the US dollar was even happening way back then. And so this just kind of shows you how slowly markets can move and how irrational markets can be and how long this stuff can perpetuate itself. Because with I think what happened with the advent of the whole COVID thing, whether or not you believe it's a scam or not, the whole pandemic, whatever your interpretation of that is, the U.S. printed more money during that time period than had ever existed in history. And so now we've sort of accelerated the fall of the dollar by printing all this money basically. And, countries who are buying our debt, buying treasuries or bonds to, sort of get us a steady return on their capital are no longer willing to do that because the value of the dollar continues to plummet. And so these countries could very well move the dollar downward because they control a massive portion of the world's industry in terms of raw materials and gas and oil. So it's going to be really interesting if these countries continue to de-dollarize. In other words, not buy bonds. The way this thing works is like the government every month does sort of an auction of debt. They call it bonds or treasuries. And people show up and buy these treasuries, and they buy them because they plan to get some sort of fixed return. And the fixed return is very low. It's like, 2%, 3%, 4%, depending on how long the loan is. And, if the dollar is depreciating faster, if you're losing purchasing power at a rate faster than you can earn interest, then you're not even keeping pace with inflation. And a lot of countries are realizing that by buying these treasury bonds, that they're ultimately losing purchasing power. So it doesn't make sense for them to do that. And if they can go away from the US dollar and start using their own currency and trade in something that they all agree has value, then they can escape that trap of losing their purchasing power. So I think this is something that's been, from my personal experience in the money world, this has been something that's been developing for 2 decades now, just about. And I think with the US printing, again, more dollars than have ever existed in history just in the last couple of years, that's just accelerating their decision to get away from the dollar.
What I've been reading a lot lately, oh man, I'm spending too much time on X probably, but what I've been reading a lot regarding the BRICS countries is that they actually might have a plan. I didn't really find official sources, but um, like I said, I got X. So they might have a plan to develop some kind of coin for their union. And then Twitter people, of course, they showed like, hey, why don't they buy Bitcoin? It's meant to be for stuff like that. It's decentralized, blah blah blah. Do you think that would be possible? These countries buying into Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, like, was it the last time we spoke, or I forget if it was last episode or the episode for that, but you were talking about like who owns the most Bitcoin, and like the US government was up there at, I think, number two. It was pretty high up, probably from coins they confiscated from, who knows where. Silk Road was probably one of them. But I think ultimately, the major governments around the world are going to have to buy Bitcoin because gold is sort of being supplanted by Bitcoin. And if you have a an unstable sort of political environment, which is basically what we're kind of getting into right now with the advent of distrust between the East and the West, between Russia and the Ukraine, between Europe and Eastern Europe, between China and the U.S. Like, as distrust continues to develop, the only thing that you can believe in is something that's trustless. And for years that was gold, but now that Bitcoin exists, if you had to transact in gold, why would you? Because you would have to actually transport tons and tons of gold across the ocean, risking piracy and loss and storms and all the rest of the stuff, and all the and at all this expense just to transact in gold. Why would you do that if you could just transact in Bitcoin, right? It doesn't make any sense not to. So I think ultimately all of these major economies are going to be holding some Bitcoin. I don't know how much, and I don't know how fast this is going to happen. But, with countries like El Salvador sort of leading the charge, with major companies putting it on their balance sheet, and with, governments like the US holding it, that tells you right there that there's value there. Plus, I think it was last time we were talking about how, like Jamie Dimon talks down Bitcoin, or, the big banks talk down Bitcoin, but they're secretly buying it behind the scenes. So I mean, there's definitely a desire for it. And, if you look at reality, the reality is money moves the world more than politics does. Usually money buys politics. So if, your political allies or enemies are holding Bitcoin, then you're going to want to do the same thing. So I think I think ultimately they have to. It's just going to come down to how fast and how much.
Yeah, but from my point of view, if China and Russia went ahead and bought like a major amount of Bitcoin, wouldn't they empower their enemies doing that?
If China bought a bunch of Bitcoin, would they empower
Buying
them?
at these prices now and knowing that, like the United States probably held from, I don't know, from 10,000.
Oh, I see what you mean in terms of like enriching them with
Yeah,
dollars.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if your theory is that the dollar is, again, like the most counterfeited currency on the planet is the US $100 bill, right? So, like, if you believe that the US $100 bill or the US dollar in general is going to hold its value, then yeah, by buying something in US dollars would potentially enrich your enemies or allies, depending on how you're looking at it. But if your theory is that the US dollar is falling and that you would rather hold an asset that doesn't, then
Mm.
you would almost rather sabotage your enemy by giving them your dollars and taking their Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean, definitely. I mean, the question is always if you put Bitcoin like in relation to the US dollar or not. And if the US dollar gets weaker and weaker, it actually doesn't matter if you buy Bitcoin or not. It won't affect the US dollar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, the US has done a really poor job of managing its position in the world. Like after, what was it, World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement was assigned, and that basically made the US dollar the world's reserve currency. And that really screwed Europe in a lot of ways, And so ultimately, all the big banks around the world held US dollars as a store of value because it was the most stable and gold-backed currency in the world. There was this idea that the gold held in Fort Knox was going to back all these dollars. But then in 1971, Richard Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard, which meant that they could just freely print as much money as they wanted. And so there's no restraint on the number of dollars that can be printed, which basically weakens the US's sort of position in the world as like this reserve currency. So if your reserve currency is being inflated away, then yeah, I mean, it makes more sense to hold something that is of high value. And to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier, you made a point that these countries are buying up gold. Well, the other thing that people might want to note is that the biggest banks around the world are buying more gold than ever before, and this generally points to trouble in the marketplace. So they're wanting to hold real assets. They're wanting to hold gold because gold is traditionally the historic store of value. And I think now that Bitcoin has come on the scene and has proven itself as a store of value, and that it's easily transferable, and it has a fixed supply, unlike gold, I think that you'll see more Bitcoin and gold purchases going into these treasuries, because that is going to be, I think, what people look to as a store of value in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's so interesting to see. There are a lot of accounts on X that you can follow that actually show you on-chain transactions, and I feel like when you see all these posts from, like accounts, it's anonymous wallets, but making these huge transactions, like buying billions of Bitcoin, that you definitely see that there is a lot going on behind the scenes right now, and I feel like like people, the big people up there do not want us to be buying Bitcoin right now. Like it feels like they are preparing to get in big, the banks and everyone, and FOMO is kicking in once we get close to the 100K, in my opinion. And yeah, I feel like the sideways movements is and especially like the drop below 60K. Um, like made a lot of people sell, believing like the bull run is over, and I think the big players do want that,
Yeah, I mean, if you're sitting on a lot of wealth, right? It's like I said before, like the first time I ever made money, I made money in the stock market. And, I had several $100,000 that I had to do something with, because otherwise it was just going to get inflated away. This was literally right before the big housing crash of 07, 08. And they were printing money like crazy back then, right? So I knew I had to do something with it. And so if you're sitting on any amount of cash, you definitely don't want it to depreciate. And these big banks and these governments around the world that are holding billions, and in some case, maybe even trillions of dollars worth of assets, they have to find a way to preserve that purchasing power, or else they become weaker versus their allies and enemies, right? So there's going to be a major push to figure out. I think there's going to be a little competition between, maybe Bitcoin and gold, or Bitcoin and some sort of real estate asset, to determine like, hey, what's going to be the best store of value? And in my opinion, the best store is Bitcoin, based on all of the traits that each one of those asset classes possesses. But again, depending on the government, depending on their technical savvy, depending on their foresight and their ability to sort of look past today and into tomorrow, they may have different views. And I think, of course, historically, with gold being like that big, sort of store of value thing, most of them will default to that. And then I think a few of the most forward looking will start bringing Bitcoin on board. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, man. But these things all point to sort of a down economy. And I think like the only way out for the average person is to be in crypto in some way, shape, or form, because it protects you against the craziness that's happening politically and in the banking world, right? So I think ultimately, if Bitcoin wins, everyone holding, Bitcoin or the major tokens like maybe even ETH or Solana, I think these people win right alongside. So we'll see what happens.
Do you think, and that's actually some kind of idea that I've been reading a lot about, but especially in Europe, do you think governments will start using blockchain technology for themselves, because I've been reading a lot in the past years about the digital euro. Do you think something like that is possible, like the digital US dollar using like blockchain technology?
Yeah, there was actually a big scare, I mean, amongst the sort of crypto community here in the US a while back because the idea of the digital dollar was being bantied about quite a bit, and it still exists. There's this idea that that the government could convert the dollar, all dollars, to digital dollars, but that's not a good thing because you got to remember, like if the government does this, then government controls the chain, government controls the technology, and then you end up with what you have in something like China, where you've got a social credit score and you can do or not do things based on how you're behaving. You know, like in China right now, like you can actually be locked out of your assets if you jaywalk and they catch you on camera breaking the law and your social credit score goes down. Like they may not let you, do certain things. Like you can't get on the subway or you can't ride the train or whatever the case may be. Like they can literally lock you out of your own accounts. And it all has to do with this social credit score system that they're creating. So anytime government has access to your assets, that's never a good thing. Never, ever, ever. And that was basically what crypto was designed to prevent. So anytime you hear governments talking about a digital dollar, a digital euro, whatever, that's never a good thing, because the minute they can control your assets, they can control you.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I feel like it depends on how they actually create the contract. If it's like still changeable and stuff like that. I mean, they probably wouldn't be able to like cap the circular the maximum supply, because they cannot do it right now. So why would they be able to do it with the digital currency? But in the end, I feel like there could be an advantage of like transparency, because the blockchain never lies. You can immediately see when new coins are being created and stuff like that. And I feel like nowadays you can do that as well. You can see like the amount of money being printed, but I feel like just a little percentage of people actually care about that.
Hmm.
I feel like if you went to any citizen and asked him like, hey, did you know that the US like printed as much money as, I don't know, you just said it, like the biggest amount compared to the last decades. And people do not know that. And yeah, but on the other hand, people have no idea about blockchain technology, so they probably wouldn't care as well. So yeah, it's a problem.
Well, I think points to the fact that, it's in the vested interest of governments to have a stupid populace, right? Like, I mean, if you go to a government school, you're never really educated very well. And, especially here in the States, like, government schools are basically laughable. Like we look at that and it's like, okay, well, you learn how to socialize and you learn how to, play sports, but you don't really learn a great deal about anything that matters in terms of thinking or educating. And it's only gotten worse over time, especially at the collegiate level, the university level. It's turned into sort of, social conditioning rather than critical thinking, which is what higher education is all about. So it's in the vested interest of government to keep people stupid, right? Like um, there's a lot of great videos floating around on the interwebs where you have somebody, like there's this one great one where this guy's holding like a stack of Hershey bars, which are chocolate bars, in one hand, and he's holding a bar of silver in the other hand, and he's walking around to people on the street and just saying, hey, which of these would you like, right? And he tells them this is a bar of pure silver and this is a Hershey bar, a chocolate bar, right? And people are looking at these two things. They first think he's crazy, and then they take the chocolate bar. Like, the silver, the bar of silver is worth a couple grand, but they want to take a 50-cent candy bar, you know? And this is the type of shit that you see like over and over and over again. And so he comes up to, in this one particular video, at least 10 or 12 people, and they all pick a chocolate bar. It makes no sense, right? So like when people are that stupid and ignorant, that's of benefit to government. And if government has control of the technology, then there's really no incentive for government to give control of that technology to anyone outside their organization, because at that point they give up power, right? So I mean, the product of Washington is power, and if they did create a U.S. digital dollar that was basically foisted upon the people, they would never make it such that it could be altered by the public. It would only be altered and audited by internal staff and technology people there. So I think that's the real danger there. Like you never want to trust government with anything, really. Like if you look at the greatest atrocities in history, they've always been committed by governments, not by people, right? So you never want to centralize anything in the hands of government, whether it's money or firearms or anything. Like you never want government to be the only one who can control it.
Okay, imagine a utopia of a world in peace,
Okay.
and we would be able to have a world coin, a currency for everyone, based on blockchain technology. Do you think, and you know, like all these coins are being shared like equally, everyone will have fair allocation and everything. Would you support that idea, or would you say that, you know, everyone is responsible for himself, and the ones who put effort in doing research should be rewarded by yeah, being able to make the right decisions?
Okay, this is a question that comes up a lot in like monetary circles, and there's this thing called the Wilt-Chamberlain fallacy. Have you ever heard of it?
Nope. Explain it, please.
Okay, so Wilt Chamberlain was a famous basketball player, right? And people would come from miles around to watch him play basketball. So I guess in Europe it would be like a famous football player, right? And a famous soccer player. Like everybody's going to come watch, I don't know, whoever the best player is right now. You know, whoever you think that is.
Don't even know a single one, man. I'm disappointed.
They're going to throw you out of Europe, man. You got to know. You got to know who that is. Okay, so let's say that tomorrow the entire world is airdropped the same amount of money, right? Like you get the same amount of money, I get the same amount of money. We all have the same amount of money. All right. But because Wilt Chamberlain is coming to play basketball at the neighboring town, right? And Wilt Chamberlain, he got airdropped the same amount of money too, right? But he's going to be playing at this arena, and this arena is going to sell tickets to 50,000, 60,000 people to come watch him play, right? Okay, so at the end of that day, right, the basketball promoter and the teams and the players are going to instantly have more money than everybody else in the world because they charged a fee from everyone's equal pool to come and play. And now Wilt Chamberlain is rich again and everybody else is poor, or everybody else is basically what they were before. So like this idea that you can give money to everyone and then it sort of equalizes everybody never works, because unless you equalize what people are willing to pay for services and what people are willing to pay for entertainment, then money flows to those values, to what people value more than, you know, what people's ideal for equality should be, right? So we can't have equality of outcome. We can only have equality of opportunity. So that means that you and I could go play basketball too, and maybe we're not as good as Wilt Chamberlain, so we don't make as much money, right? But we have the opportunity to have that. So we want equality of opportunity, but not equality of outcome, because the only way to support that is with men with guns. And we don't want men with guns stealing from us at all times.
Yeah, get that. So that basically means everyone, okay, but that's another question, if everyone basically has the same opportunity or not. Because obviously not everyone has the same opportunities.
Right.
Outside, you know, like the Western countries, and yeah.
Yeah, that's true, right? And then some people, it's interesting because when you think of it in terms of equalizing opportunity, like the only way you equalize opportunity is under the law, you know, and socially everyone has the opportunity to do something legally. It doesn't mean they have the opportunity to do it financially. It doesn't mean they have the wherewithal. But the interesting thing in like pure capitalism, which doesn't exist anywhere, like the U.S. is famous for being a capitalist society. But the U.S. is a managed economy. There is no pure capitalism here. We don't have that. We've never had that. And so at the end of the day, like if we have a capitalist society, let's say you have um, a guy who makes $6 million this year in his business. Maybe he's a plumbing contractor, and he's got 15 guys working for him, and they're out in the field and they pull in a total of $6 million. So of those, after expenses, he makes maybe $3 million. All right. Well, he has two kids, and then when he retires, he wills both of his kids $1 million. But let's say he started from nothing. He started with one truck and a skill set, but his kids grew up in this big house, and they had the best education, and they had access to anything and everything, and they never had to work very hard, and they didn't really develop the skill of overcoming adversity. So they inherit their $1 million, and maybe they start a business and have a little bit of success, and then it goes to the next generation, and the next generation has completely separated itself from the first generation, and the money is lost. And so what we find is that over the course of 3 generations, in where capitalism is concerned, the money flows from the competent to the incompetent, and the incompetent lose it in 3 generations. So there's no like monopolization of money where opportunity exists for all. So you could come from nothing, like you could come from a ghetto and be like the best basketball player in the world and make billions of dollars, or you could come from a middle class household, never face any adversity, never develop skill sets, never develop a business, and just live a middle class life. Or you could be the son of a wealthy person and lose all the money in 3 generations. It just depends on, how that individual person acts in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that situation that you just described is a big problem of like a lot of these wealthy people trying to like whenever they get kids and they like they're obviously born rich, they feel like these kids do not put any effort in like building something and trying to get some kind of skill set, and I'm not even so sure about that because of do you feel like people or kids from like rich parents have better opportunities? Definitely, right?
Yeah, they have better opportunities, but do they have better skills is the question. Because the market doesn't care about your opportunity. It cares about what you can provide it, right? And I can speak from personal experience here. On one side of my family, my mom's side of the family, very poor, farmers, lived in old houses, trailers. They had land, but they never really had much money. On my dad's side of the family, his brother was a very wealthy guy. He made, he had an 8-figure business at one point. He made 40, $50 million in his business career. And this was back in the 80s when that was a shit ton of money, right? Now, my dad's brother had 6 kids, one of which he adopted. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that his kids are 100% useless. They don't know anything. They don't know how to make money. They will never be rich. They were just basically going to spend everything that they were given, and they will never accomplish anything great in life because they were given everything. And because my uncle wasn't there to like give them the time and invest in them and teach them, he was always working. Like he worked, 14, 16-hour days. He was never there for his family, so he would just buy them stuff, right? And so when you meet them, they're spoiled, they think they're entitled to everything. And now that he's dead and that they've already spent their inheritance, they're not doing anything. They're just living your average, everyday, normal life, right? So I can tell you from experience that that's how that happens. But it depends on the family. Like some families will teach their kids what it takes to maintain wealth, and other families won't. And the difference is in the knowledge, not in the assets themselves.
Yeah, but I feel like it depends on the situation and it depends on how you actually got rich. Because I mean, the United States are probably a pretty good example because look at the celebrities you have. Look at how is the Kardashian family, for example. Like there is one person famous,
Mhm.
and in case you are some kind of sibling or if you're a kid from her, just create like some kind of social media account. You will get thousands of followers, and you'll be able to earn money and earn big without even having any kind of significant skill set, you know.
Hmm.
So it's definitely a difference if you are, you know, like, I don't know, if your father found some kind of company and was successful, or if you are, you know, like born rich and find a way to be able to make money without even having to, you know, like having to have certain skills.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So if we look at the Kardashians, for example, or we look at entertainers, I like to look at entertainers a lot because entertainers tend to be more left leaning in their politics. And they always talk about how, how stingy and how, sort of, I guess you'd say how hard the right is, when it comes to like dealing with people or dealing with finances and that sort of thing. But the truth is, like, if you look at like Kardashian family net worth, like it's in the billions. Like Kim's worth more than $1 billion. Kylie's worth more than $1 billion. And so we can look at that and we can say, okay, well, how many people do they employ? All right, well, they employ a film crew and they employ an editorial staff, right? And so they probably employ 50, 60 people by the time you throw in, makeup artists, and all the people that it takes for them to look the way that they look on camera, right? Okay, cool deal. No big deal. They have a business based on gossip, really, and then they employ 50, 60 people. But the same people will criticize like a CEO who makes, maybe 600,000 to $1 million a year and who employs 1,000 people, right? So the question is like, who is providing more value? Well, the CEO of the business is providing more value because he's supporting 1,000 families, right? Like Taylor Swift can come to Phoenix and make $10 million tomorrow in ticket sales. Right now, she'll pay her band and she'll pay her transportation people and her setup and takedown people. Maybe she employs 50, 60 people, right? But the vast majority of that money will be hers. She can do with it what she wants. And she's employing, 50, 60 people who have families maybe. But that same person will criticize, again, like a CEO or a small business owner who wants to keep the money that they earn, right? And call them stingy. So it's kind of interesting to see the whole dynamic play out. And then it's also interesting to look at the timeline. Like, where are we in the timeline of the country? So right now, the U.S. is a late stage democracy, and meaning that most of its people have everything that they need, or most of the things that they need, and most of the things that they want. And so the job really of entertainment is to keep people distracted, because so many people have free time that they don't even know what to do with, right? The average American watches 6 hours of television per day. The average American kid spends over 8 hours a day on a cell phone. Okay. We're not reading and learning. We're not studying philosophy. We're not doing mathematics. They're not contributing to the world in any major way. They're just basically giving their attention to these people. So we're in an era where if you can get attention, that's super valuable to a business. So whatever network the Kardashian family is on is making serious money off of them because they have the ability to gain attention. It's the same thing with entertainers, same thing with comedians. It's funny, actually, Jay Leno mentioned this one time, because he's worth many hundreds of millions of dollars. And he just said, we happen to live in a time where what I do is rewarded, right? Like if we lived in like a different era where, it was important for people to, grow food or to, build factories or to create businesses, then comedians and entertainers wouldn't be as valuable. But we've already gone through that period. So now we're in a period where entertainers and attention getters are more valuable. And that's always going to be the case. So like 100 years from now, the Kardashian family's, position in the world will be very different. It'll depend on, what we need in that moment. And a lot of people estimate what we're going to need is farmers. So like the next upper class will be farmers. So who knows? Like I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but that's what a lot of people say and speculate about, right?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays you can actually see, I mean, you can make a shit ton of money doing like weird dances on TikTok nowadays, And what I would have liked to know is, if a Kylie Jenner, for example, would be worth billions if she was born in a poor family. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, unless she had the business acumen to develop that, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, let's just be honest. Like if I saw Kim Kardashian walking down the street and she wasn't Kim Kardashian, I wouldn't look at her twice. You know, same thing with Kylie Jenner. If I saw Kylie Jenner walking down the street just as a normal person in normal clothes, I wouldn't give her a second look. Right? No one would care. But it is true that who you are matters, right? Like if I'm looking at one of my mentors in business, this guy named Alex Hormozy, who is a super smart guy, right? Like I could say the exact same thing that he says on Twitter today, and I'll get 2 likes and he'll get 2,000. Why? Because he's Alex Hormozy and he's built a following, and it takes years and a lot of accomplishment to do that, right? I haven't done that work. I didn't even get on Twitter until a year ago, right? So I haven't earned that. So, you know, at the end of the day, like developing that following and developing that ability to, you know, hone your craft into something special matters. And the Kardashians have done a good job of honing that. They've really tapped into the gossip market, to the stay-at-home, you know, mom market, to the teenage market, to the makeup market. I mean, they're living in an era where everything they do is perfectly designed for them to make money. But this may not be the case 100 years from now. Who knows? You know, maybe some family in the future is famous because they, I don't know, came up with a fancy tractor or something. Who knows? You know, I mean, like look at, what was it, Lamborghini, right? Like Lamborghini started making tractors and, you know, because he had a feud with Ferrari, and now his car, you know, sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and nobody cares about a Lamborghini tractor, right? It's like, give me the car. I don't care about the tractor. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like the time that you live in matters, and how you know, execute in that time frame matters. And so like with Goodfellas, like the fact that we're at the beginning of the NFT market matters. You know, we have an opportunity that people who are not paying attention to that market will never have. And it's up to us to manage it and care for it and make sure that we do a good job with it, treat people right, and ultimately provide value in terms of high quality collectibles and bringing in good people to our little world, right? And so, you know, we can do really well with that, or we could squander the opportunity. It just kind of depends.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. I mean, we are very much like in the beginning, as you mentioned. Maybe, you know, like in 5 years, new projects that come up will say, like in their spaces or in their podcasts, will say like, "Hey, the Goodfellas wasn't built in a day either," you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, but good that you mention it, because we also have a big week coming up for the Goodfellas. For those of you guys who have been on Spaces the last time, you have already get to know Daria. She is our our next artist incubator artist, and I think if you haven't listened to the episode yet, feel free to check it out on X or on the podcast. It will be uploaded. And Daria actually explained a lot about her and why and how she became an artist. The most interesting part for me, to summarize it a little bit, was actually that she said that she didn't really feel like she had a lot of talent, but she had to practice a lot, a lot, a lot. And yeah, that's quite interesting, because even in terms of, you know, like building skills, it's always about consistency and patience. And it actually comes down to that whenever you talk about being successful in any place, you know, like yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And yeah, we are looking forward to the drop on Tuesday. It's going to be launched on, I'm not even sure if we managed to, maybe we should try to put that episode out real quick. But it will be launched at 5 p.m. UTC, and the piece is called Power. And Daria, I can actually read that out exclusively on the podcast, because Daria actually wrote a little description for that piece. And while I am looking for it, Jason, you can tell us your opinion to that piece.
Oh yeah, this is the first piece is actually my favorite piece, and we talked a little bit about this on the Spaces, which actually kind of ties into what we were talking about. You know, you made the comment that she said something about how she works at her art, you know, and how she works at being a good creator. And this kind of touches on what you were talking about. It's like everyone right now has the same opportunity to create art. Like if we wanted to stop everything that we're doing and focus on becoming an artist, we could, right? We have that opportunity. But at the end of the day, how many people are going to capitalize on it? You know, how many people are going to take the time to put in the effort to learn how to draw, whether it's digital or physical or whatever, or some combination of the two? And it was really cool to hear her talk about that. Like she's like, I'm not basically saying I'm not a naturally gifted, artist. This is something that I work at, and this is something that I put energy and effort into. And that's something that I can appreciate, because those are the type of people who actually come up with the best things. That they get to be the best at their craft, and they're often not taught, in a school. I think about music. I'm big into music. Like Eddie Van Halen, one of the greatest guitarists, was never taught guitar in a school. Like he learned these things himself. Same thing with a lot of blues guitarists. And so it's really cool to see her put together a composition that is really steeped in philosophy and fantasy and some of the things that she really cares about. And, she's found a way to develop the skill set to get what's in her head onto a digital page. And I feel like that's one of those things that is, and I think she mentioned it, like she's like, it's really frustrating at the beginning when you're trying to figure all this stuff out. But then once you get there, it starts to make sense, and you start to, really enjoy the process, and you can pull what's in your head out and put it on the paper or the digital page. And I think that's really powerful. So I think just knowing a little bit about her story and where she's coming from the fantasy realm, and then these really heavy philosophical ideas like power, for example, like what does that really mean? I think it's really cool. And it was cool that she had an opinion, like she wasn't being, a politician about her opinions. She's like, here's what I think, here's how I feel. And it's rare to find people who are secure enough to say things like that in the modern world. So I can appreciate her, and I can appreciate what she's creating because I know a little bit more about her personally now.
What I loved most about her, as a person as well, is her dedication for the job. Because she told us that she went full-time Web3 artist like a year ago, if I'm or 1 or 2 years ago. She was able to quit her 9 to 5 job, and I asked her about her, like, how does a day in her life look like, and she was like, yeah, I usually do some exercise, and then I actually draw all day long. And I mean, you and we've been talking about that a lot, like the communication with artists. They are not responsive. They are smoking pot somehow many times, and it's always like a little struggle to get some kind of proper work and proper collaboration. So with Maria and her, I feel like we've made the best decision so far, and definitely couldn't be happier with this artist now.
Yeah, for sure, man. You're spot on. My buddy in the music business says the same thing. Like making an appointment with an artist is like a crapshoot. You never know if they're going to show up. You never know if they're going to show up on time, and you never know if they're going to show up at all. So it's kind of funny that's how that works. But that personality is sort of needed in that world because of the spontaneity and the creativity that they're in their own little world creating cool things for us. But it is nice to find the high functioning artist, like the one who can keep their commitments and the one who can like show up on time and deliver their goods on time, because it makes, from a organizational / business viewpoint, it makes life much, much easier for us because we can plan around that. So it's super, super cool to have someone that's easy to work with. And Maria, was very much like that. I think Daria is going to be very much like that as well. So I'm stoked, and kudos to you on finding two great artists straight out of the gate, man. You did a great job.
Yeah, took some time. Had to go through a lot of conversations, but I'm definitely felt like you know, in the meantime, I probably would have had the chance to choose like someone would have been willing to be part of the artist incubator. But in the end, I feel like we want to deliver quality and good artists. And yeah, we will have 21 pieces again. One piece will be signed, as you know from the Maria drop, and we haven't really spoken about that yet, but I'm sure we'll figure out something for people who are able to collect all 4 pieces, right?
Definitely. And remember, like on the signed pieces, there's a bounty for that piece. You get half your mint funds back, right? So if you get the 21st piece, make sure you open up a ticket and let myself or Alex know, and we'll shoot you half your mint costs back. It's just sort of a little bonus for collecting that autograph. Plus, there's a role that's assigned to that trait now inside our discords. If you guys know, we updated all the roles recently, and that is one of them. So you definitely want to be, if you hold the autograph role, there's going to be some doors open for you as we continue down the path as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. I'm r- really curious about the community's opinion on that piece. And I think we are done with the topics for today, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I just want to say one quick thing before we get out of here. We talked a lot about philosophy today, a lot about sort of, I guess you'd say, wealth distribution, but also the philosophy behind money and the incentives. I just want to take a look at the markets really quick and just point a couple things out. Bitcoin broke out above 68,000 just recently, which is the highest it's been, I think, in the last 30 or 40 days because we had that pullback after the halving. And then along with it, guess what? Solana followed, Ethereum followed, all the altcoins followed, right? So if you've been following even closely, even moderately closely to some of the things that we've been putting out, we keep saying, buy when people are depressed, downtrodden, distressed, like buy when there's blood in the streets, the old adage, right? Even if the blood is your own. Because anytime the story doesn't change, like in the story with crypto just continues to get stronger, it's just a sale price. It's a time for you to multiply your assets. So, we keep saying these things, watch for dips, buy those dips, pay close attention. Don't worry about the 50x or the 100x. If you hit one of those, congratulations. I love you. Enjoy your winnings. But on the whole, on the long term, if you just buy these little dips consistently over time with quality assets, as long as the story doesn't change, you're going to do really well. So same thing with us, same thing with the NFT market, buy the little dips, pick up the quality pieces, hold them long term, and you're going to do really well. This particular trading strategy here took, like I said, over 40 days, right? 40 days, which is like 4 years in the crypto community, to sort of play out and get new highs. But if you bought at 59, if you bought Bitcoin at 59 or you bought Solana in the 120s, you're loving life today, right? And it took 40 days for that to play out. So, keep these little ideas in mind, be patient, and you're going to do really well. That's probably the biggest message that we can put forth on the monetary side with the Goodfellas NFT project. And, a big part of what we want to do is educate people. So I just wanted to point this out before we got out of there and shut this episode down, that if you just exercise a little bit of patience and a little bit of foresight, you're going to be just fine. And actually you're going to be better than the average person.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better, man. Beautiful last words. So we are out for today. See you guys hopefully tomorrow at the Mint and on Spaces on Friday. And this was it for today. And yeah, see you next time, guys. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.